Always happy to have you. I love seeing familiar faces. And who knows, Rebecca and Lynn have probably been in your area or recruited in your area. But yeah, we're happy, lucky, welcome to have Lynn Barboza, executive recruiter, and Rebecca Fleury, president of executive recruitment, join us today. Feel free to introduce yourselves to our audience.
Thanks, Helson. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Yep, my name is Rebecca Fleury, and I'm the new president for executive recruitment at SGR. I started in early August after retiring in a wonderful career as city manager, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. There's a lot happening in the world of executive recruitment, particularly in the public sector, and I'm excited to share that news with all of you. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Helson. Excited to be here. My name's Lynn Barbosa. I have worked with SGR for about 7-8 years. Previous to that, I worked for City of Las Vegas, 27 years, and closed out my career there in human resources. I do executive recruitment throughout the United States for different positions, from department director to city manager, and looking forward to chatting with everyone today.
It's going to be a good time. Good morning from the Seattle area, Sarah. Hi, Meryl. Nice to see you here. So today we're going to try to have a really balanced conversation, including client experience, candidate experience, and then the process. So how about we start off with client, Rebecca, from a client perspective, how does SGR take a relational approach to executive recruitment that's grounded in authenticity and servant leadership?
Great, thanks, Helson. I'd be happy to talk about our client experience and how we're constantly evolving. And really, it starts with SGR's foundation of servant leadership and really wanting to be relational and not transactional. And we take that very seriously. And so when we talk about the client experience, we do mean it. What we want, what we're trying to express there is that we're good listeners of what the client needs. And then we can share kind of the experience we've had in being in the executive recruiting business in the public sector for so many years. Just today, I want to give you an example because we're constantly working with clients and working within the parameters of our proposals and search requirements. And, it all feels sometimes very bureaucratic. So we're trying to put more of that human touch. So recently we had a potential new client reach out and ask us for assistance in firefighting recruiting. Now, we all know that both police and fire recruitment right now is a challenge wide. And so I kudos to this particular community who is thinking differently about firefighter recruitment. Well, that is not necessarily a typical request that we get at SGR. Lots of times we'll get those through a web portal or a specific outreach by a staff person or, on the road crews that we have out there right now. And so what I love about that is what we took was a very, more institutional request. And we reached out directly to the client to say, hey, help us understand what you're really looking for here, because this is very different. It's a very different process for us to think about. So we asked some very specific questions from, one of our recruiters who is a retired fire chief, who was the perfect person to help us ask the right questions to be sure we understood what the client was asking for and looking for, so that then we can tailor our proposal to their specific needs. You can't really do that with just kind of a one-way or just a web-based interaction. You really need to reach out to the client to ask those questions, the clarifying questions, so that we can tailor the proposal to their needs. So, literally that just happened this morning, but it's a regular occurrence because we want to make sure that the information we present to clients is tailored to their very specific needs, whether it's fire, police, or city manager or HR director. It's important that we ask those clarifying questions so that what we give to them for consideration, and sometimes in a very official consideration in a public forum, that it meets, it meets their needs, and that we're basically putting our best foot forward, but we're also leaning on our foundation of servant leadership and the years of experience we have in executive recruitment at the public sector.
Wow, that is awesome. That's awesome. What some organizations might consider extra steps or waste, it sounds like SGR really takes in as a help us understand as essential, right? It doesn't matter if it does require more, it's worth it. I also love hearing about the network of expertise that connects SGR. So having someone with fire experience and being able to lean on them to connect with that municipality is great.
I think, and you make a good point, Housen, is that, early on, our founder recognized the value of having practitioners as the recruiters, because it makes a huge difference to a client if you've actually sat in the seat of the position that they're hiring for, because, you can share those experiences, whether they were positive or negative. Those are great experiences, to be able to work with the hiring body, whether it's an elected body or whether it's a team of senior executive leaders, et cetera. It matters that you have that experience. And we pull from that in every search that we do. We love having a cadre of retired city managers from all over the country, because they bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to their recruitment jobs. And I think I commend the leaders early on for recognizing that, because many of us who retired out of the profession, whether we're department heads or city managers, et cetera, or chiefs, we want to continue to give back to the profession, maybe just not in that full-time role, where being an executive recruiter for SGR is a perfect way to continue to give back in the profession that we love, and use and rely on our experience with elected bodies as well as hiring boards.
Awesome. Yeah, if you want to be good at placing, you actually first need to be in the relationship business, right? And there's more to knowledge than just what you can read. Having that lived experience is key.
And I think it
Awesome.
gives clients the comfort, you know what I mean, that they need to be able to go through the process, because it is stressful, for the client as well as candidates, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I think it helps put a lot of more at ease and give confidence that they've got the right team working for them to find their candidate.
That's great. Yeah, and I'd love to hear some more experiences from a candidate perspective as well. Lynn, what have you seen, or how do you think SGR takes a relational approach to ER from a candidate?
Well, I do think it is part of our DNA. I think, from my very first experience with SGR myself, with Ron Hollifield, it was very evident that he leads with relationships. He's a very people-centered leader, and that's how we've designed our process. That's how we hire recruiters, and it's what I love about recruiting, to be honest. Learning people's stories, honestly, just being able to ask questions, understand what motivates them to be interested in this particular opportunity, um, helping them see where their experience aligns and where there may be areas of growth related to the particular position they're applying for. So, what SGR really emphasizes in that candidate relationship is transparency and engagement between client and candidate. So, really facilitating a two-way exploratory process for not only the client, but the candidate. And then I'd say third is support, and providing that support as we would appreciate. We've all been on the candidate side ourselves. And I always envision myself flying into a city that I'm not intimately familiar with, right, to go on site for interviews, and how intimidating that can be. Finding this new city hall and navigating up to where the interviews are, meeting 40 people and 4 different panels. And so we really are focused at SGR on preparing our candidates for that, supporting them through that process, and being transparent about the opportunity. And that transparency really begins at the client stage with understanding as a recruiter everything you can about the community, the organization, and the opportunity so that you can really share all of that with prospective candidates, and they can make an informed decision whether this makes sense for them as a next step career-wise. So those are some of the high-level ways that SGR prioritizes that candidate relationship. I do have a, a story about the relationship piece of recruiting. Really early on for an HR director search, I had an excellent candidate with whom I'd worked. She was in my network, and she was a finalist for my search for this different agency. And she ended up withdrawing. And I know every recruiter that's listening can really sympathize and understand how difficult that is, right? You know that this candidate would be perfect for the position. You really want your client to meet them, but life happens. Circumstances were such that she ended up withdrawing. That was about 6 years ago. Another human resources director search that I did about a year ago, because she and I had stayed in touch and maintained a really strong relationship. I followed her career. She ended up referring a candidate to me that was the one selected. So really that long game that you'll hear our leadership talk about, being in it for the long game, being in it for what's best, not only for the client in a search, but also, for the candidate as well, and just being relational in our approach.
Wow, 6 years. Yeah, it's once you're in the relationship, you're not out. That's awesome. Okay. And what
I'll never let you
strikes
go.
yeah. And what's striking to me is about what you shared, Lynn, is how I guess intimately connected the client and candidate relationship is. Where, if you don't understand the local government, then how can you lead with transparency, right? And really let the candidate know, here's what to expect, here's what they need. And that way you can align not just the bare minimum requirements, but growth areas as well. Like, where do they want to grow in their career, and how does that link with so?
Really, yes, really valid point. And some of what I think we do as well in facilitating that two-way process is we really emphasize with our clients, this needs to be interactive. So we are using some new technology to implement two-way interviews. So that's one way that we are making sure that the candidate learns just as much and has an opportunity to ask questions of the client as the other way around. So that's that other piece, that transparency, the engagement, the two-way interaction, and then that support throughout.
Man, that's a great segue into process, right? Process and technology. Since process technology impacts both candidate and client, I'd love to hear more about how SGR embraces technology to enhance the human touch and improve recruitment experience.
Yeah, so we're always looking for ways to be more efficient, streamline, make it a really easy process, both as easy as possible for the client and the candidate. Some of the tangible ways that we're doing that, we are in the process of implementing a new applicant tracking system and CRM that has a lot of functionality. It's a really robust system that will enhance our communication with candidates and clients. So there'll be more direct access to current status for candidates. And then on the client end, there'll be that really timely submission of prospective candidate information. We're at the very beginning stages of that implementation, but really, really excited about that. I mentioned the two-way interview piece, which is also part of that new system. And so we're doing that. We've also made some improvements in our marketing materials, which again, I think is about transparency, making sure that the right information makes its way into the position profile, so that while it's not overwhelming to prospective candidates, they can see at a glance what this opportunity is about, and what the ideal candidate looks like.
Got it. Okay. Rebecca, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, although Lynn said it very eloquently, what I wanted to point out too is how we got to that position or where we are in considering a different CRM is feedback from both client and candidate about their experience. And so we're always looking for ways to leverage technology in those experiences because, oftentimes everybody thinks that it's all about the client. Or it's all about the candidate, but it's really about both. And it's about bringing together both of the needs throughout the search process. Communication is what we hear, and both the client and the candidate want that. And so if we can leverage technology to make sure that that's a constant flow of information to both the client and the candidate, we should be doing that times 10. Because, as Lynn said, we've been there as a candidate. And it can feel really, like lonely at the beginning of the process because a lot of the communication is happening with the client. And then the client feels the same when we kind of move into a lot of communication with the candidates. And so we're just using the CRM and these new systems and processes to make sure that's a constant flow of information and it gives access to information for both the client and the candidate. Some of the, kind of the bigger pieces of our search process that we've heard that's really relevant and resonating right now with both client and candidate is background and media searches. That used to be a very laborious labor. It was a very time consuming process. And I'm the wife of a police officer, so I absolutely know a background can be very labor intensive and take a long time. But not every role that we're hiring is police. So how can we make sure that we understand the information that's going to be most important to the client regarding the candidate, and how can we make sure that the information that we're providing to the client about the candidate is accurate, timely, and so leveraging technology has been a huge help in this particular area. We are using AI to gather information, but not forgetting the importance of the human review and proofing of that information. We've all heard from it, if you're using AI, that's great, you can trust it, but you must verify it. The two go together. So we're making sure that certainly we're leveraging the highest and best use of technology in those processes, but making sure that we're also doing the verification on the back end, using people who are familiar and have a great deal of experience in taking a look at backgrounds and media searches. Particularly if you think about social media, you imagine the amount of information that can be gathered on just one on one candidate. I'll use myself as an example. Doing a social media search on myself, I think I produced 1,100 pages because I'm a very proud retired city manager out of Michigan, particularly Battle Creek, Michigan. Every time I, was part of a public hearing or a meeting or said something in a media interview, et cetera, I appeared. So, a lot of times we're hearing from the clients and the candidates, they want a timely process. Well, to go through one candidate, 1,100 pages is not probably going to be a quick process. So how can we synthesize that information to give a good summary to the client to be able to consider, but then also have the backup material to be able to support, the information that we're sharing. So constantly, evolving and evaluating our processes to be the most helpful to the client as well as the candidate. Because we've had some instances where we want to make sure we're actually using the right candidate. Many people have the similar names, and so the human verification helps us kind of make sure that we're giving the best information to the client and it's accurate from the candidate perspective as well. So really leveraging that information, and then I will reiterate the importance of constant feedback from our clients and candidates. Lynn has done some amazing work in making sure that the surveys we provide to our clients and to our candidates at the end of our processes is, we're asking the right questions to elicit that feedback so that when we get, kind of some of that tough constructive criticism, we're using that to improve how we advance. I think that's been in place at SGR for, well before my time. I just think that speaks volumes about, we do care about how this process impacts client and candidate. And, we have stories. For example, we just recently received feedback from a candidate in one of our searches, and this is a candidate that did not get the job, but still shared what a positive experience they had with SGR, from the recruiter to the process, how they were treated, and how they felt. Even though they didn't get the job, they said that they would be more than happy to be part of another SGR recruitment because of how they were treated. That matters. That we want to lift up and learn from and share widely, because that's what we want to hear from every client and from every candidate. And if we don't, then how can we not make that mistake again? That's the importance of feedback that we get from our surveys, and it's why we are very diligent about that in every search that we do.
I love that openness to feedback. Absolutely. And it sounds like the role of technology and process improvement at SGR is to facilitate that communication, right? So, and make sure that communication is trusted and quick, right? So that both parties can make a decision that really aligns with them. Awesome. So one thing I want to, I'd love to hear, we have the time, so I'd love to hear a little bit just about your passion or, for executive recruitment, or, why it matters for local governments. So just to throw a heads up out there, I'd love to hear a little bit from both of you, just like, why does this matter to you? I also want to call up for folks in the audience. Feel free to ask questions at the end. We'll go through some, some tips on being good clients, candidates as well. So if you have questions, feel free to keep that in mind. But yeah, I think, just speaking from the heart, Lynn, if you'd like to go first, I'm curious. I heard a little bit of it, but, tell me more about your passion for executive recruitment, or why it matters for local government.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I feel like I'm passionate about so many different things, but especially working with our candidates and clients. And honestly, it really kind of just is who I am, as far as asking questions and being interested in other people's stories, where they want to be, not only their story of where they've been, but what, they want to do, what their hopes and dreams are, what where their family sees themselves, because that's a really important part of it too. As I work with hiring leaders, that they want this community and this opportunity to be a good fit, and really what that candidate and their family members are looking for. So I really like to dive into that and see where the fit is, and if there are areas where a candidate could tell their story a little bit differently, or relate experience that may not seem traditional, in the sense of a local government leadership position, that, I want to help them tell that story in a really compelling, authentic way. I think it matters a lot because it's, local government operations, as a whole. It's, the community, and the community where, I live, where my children live. Where, having worked for the city of Las Vegas, for one of the most amazing city managers for most of my career, I saw the impact of her relationship with our city council, and the way she interacted with members of her team, and how that materialized into the day-to-day lives for me and my daughters, who lived right there in Las Vegas for so many years. So I think, like a lot of people, I like to see the impact, and I love to learn about people's story and help them tell it.
I love that. Yeah, I really resonate with that. I think when it comes to how I approach relationships, it very much is like, I want to, like, I almost see their story as a movie, or a movie or a book. And it's almost like it's a pleasure to either, just watch from afar or play some role and influencing, choose your own adventure where that unfolds. And I think for local government, sometimes, working with SGR can expand who's in the story, right? Like they might have not known this person existed, right? And everyone, there's a lot of great local government leaders. And so being able to bring in characters that they never would have met otherwise can really help amplify that impact and just change more than just candidate client life. So anything you want to add to that, Rebecca, in terms of kind of what drew you to local government or executive recruitment specifically?
No, I mean, I think Lynn said it really, really well. I mean, I think it's a calling, and true to kind of SGR's foundation, public service, particularly in, high-end roles or executive roles, it's all about the long game. It's very relational. Because I mean, I viewed that as a city manager as like my top priority, the relationship that I had with my elected body, and I got to work with some great elected officials, and the relationship I had with my team, not just my senior leadership team, but, the entire team at the city, in my case, Battle Creek. It mattered, and it mattered that we help them understand how they connect with the community they serve. And that's what I love about recruitment too, is to listen to candidate stories and how they feel like their experiences, whether they're traditional or non-traditional, can play a role in the community in which they're hoping to work at. I think that speaks volumes. And we are seeing a lot of non-traditional candidates considering these roles, and I think that's valuable. I mean, even for me myself, I started my professional life as a teacher, and ended up as a city manager. And it's because somebody took a chance on me, and I appreciated that. And that's what I want to give back in executive recruiting, is that it's all about the fit. We have to understand the community from the client's eyes. They are the expert about their communities, and then help them find candidates that fit what they're looking for and fit within that community. Because as Lynn said, it isn't just about that role, the city manager role or the police chief role. It's a role their whole family is going to take on. And so understanding the community in which they're considering, is incredibly important and valuable. And that's what we try to match. That's what I love about SGR, is because they come at it from a relational perspective and not just a cookie cutter approach. And I think that resonates with both our clients and our candidates. I mean, we probably, all of us that have served in the public sector have gone through a bad experience. And we use a lot, I use, bad experiences I would have to make sure that we never have that experience, in a search process that we take on at SGR. So we kind of learn from that. Again, that goes back to, that's why we gather feedback at a variety of points in our processes, to make sure that everyone involved is having a good experience. And that's what I love about executive recruiting. I love that that's our role, is to make sure that everybody has a good experience, even if you're not the candidate selected, so that hopefully you'll remain. And as Lynn said, 6 years later, you're still a part of the SGR family.
Dang, if I had a mic, I'd drop it. Okay, all right. So we have some questions in the chat, but so we see you and it will be answered. But just want to close off with some I guess words of advice or tips for both candidates and clients. Lynn, how can clients go from good to great? What is a good client, and what can they do to really make themselves great?
I think I'm going to grab one, if that's okay, Lynn.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I just want to make sure, because and the reason why I kind of asserted myself is, we had it just 2 nights ago. We had a very, very specific example that we wanted to share. We were doing kind of a closing pitch and to an elected body for a city manager recruitment proposal. And it was a profound question asked by the elected body, and it's made me, I can't stop thinking about it. But what this person said was, if you had a magic wand, how would you tell us to prepare to be a good client? for this search we're about to undertake. And I thought, wow, first of all, that shows incredible amount of respect for the process they were about to go into, but also asking us that question because we've worked with so many clients. And so we kind of, I know that Lynn and others of us kind of sat back and said to ourselves, okay, what advice can we give to clients? And so, the first thing I think that popped up for me is that to be a great client, you really need to work together as a body. This example is very specific to an elected body, but it's important. Yes, you all have a voice on that, but when you enter into a search for a city manager, city administrator, et cetera, you have to work together as a body. It's important because candidates look for that. They will have done their research on the community up until this point, to gather their own thoughts and opinions about how you work together as a body. But it's really important that you do that throughout the search process because, it's being watched from the candidate and from your community level. So one, you need to be able to work together as a body. And then number two is be clear about the job description and the profile so that candidates know exactly what skills and experience you're looking at. And that's really, you work together with your recruiter to create that, but you know what you're looking for. And so you want to make sure that the materials that we create and then we disseminate as part of our search process is exactly, that explains exactly what you're looking for. And then third, we kind of realized that you need to be honest about the culture of your organization and your community. Oftentimes we think that people are only going to see the negative parts of us, but that's not necessarily the case. There's so many things in every community you work with that you lift up all of the great things that your community offers. But also be honest about any hiccups that you've had along the way, specifically recently, so that candidates can make, the evaluation for themselves. Is this the right fit for myself and my family? And it is. I mean, it's okay to say, yep, I'm a city manager in a state where we get a lot of snow. That's okay. Some people don't like snow, but they'll make that determination. Or I live in a community that has experienced, flooding or some sort of environmental, bad occurrence. It's okay to speak up about that because I bet you have a lot of success stories in how you came together and really worked through and problem solved for things like that. So I think that third thing was just be honest about who you are, your history, where you are right now, and where you see yourselves going as a community and an organization. That resonates with clients, and don't be afraid to tell your story because there's amazing stories to tell in all the communities that we work with.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Being real honest, right? Being honest about where you're at right now, and then co-creating, what the needs are, so that we're all on the same page. Lynn, would you like to go into candidates and what a good
Yes.
candidate is and what a great one might be?
I thank you so much. Well, Rebecca, a lot of what Rebecca said translates over on the candidate side, right? Being honest about who you are, what you bring to the table as a candidate, and being able to articulate that in such a way that, first of all, the hiring leader will remember you, but also be able to evaluate your skill set compared to what they're looking for. And I see where candidates are the most successful, where they come in being authentically who they are, really strong grasp on what their strengths are, and they let the process play out. And I've heard some of them say, even during the interview, hey, this is what I bring. If that's what this city or county is looking for, I'd be honored to serve in that capacity. But they are not trying to just provide an answer that they think the hiring leader is looking for, right? So I hear a lot of do research on the organization. I really emphasize do research on yourself, and really, as a candidate, know who you are, know what you bring, be honest about that, be human, and show up with that compelling story.
It's great. I like that counterintuitiveness. All right, so we got some questions, and so I want to just hop right into those, make sure you have enough time to answer them. first one we've got is very high level. But how is SGR preparing for or thinking about AI in future hiring for local government? So they've done interviews with robots through software and one-way interviews for executive roles. So, how are you thinking about the role of AI in executive recruitment for local governments?
I'm not sure which one of us. I think
Whoever would like to
I think Lynn has
share, yeah.
some really good examples. We're embracing AI in the executive recruitment realm, but we're also being cautious as well. And I know Lynn mentioned it, and when we were talking about ways that we're improving our processes from an interview perspective, so I'll let her talk about that. But certainly we're leveraging AI to make sure that we gather information and summarize information quickly and succinctly for both clients and candidates. But again, what I said earlier is, but we're not eliminating the human proof in all of that, because we have found instances where AI does a great job in going out and scraping the information we need to put together on candidates, but doesn't always get it right. And without that human proof look, we might not, you know what I mean? We might have shared information that wasn't correct, or it was on a different person, because, there's a lot of John M. Smiths out there, and we want to make sure that, we are certainly taking a look at the correct John M. Smith. And there's where that relational piece comes in. We have to have that relationship with a candidate to be able to say, hey, these are some of the things we're finding in our background and media searches. Is this you or is it not you? So that we make sure that we put the best package we can together for the client that's an adequate and accurate reflection of the candidate. So, I think using and leveraging AI to speed up timeliness and to help us, gather and mine a lot of information out there is what, is kind of what we're looking at, but always looking at other ways that we can lift up and leverage AI as well. But again, when we talk about relational, we don't want to take out the human component, because in the public sector, we serve real people and we provide real municipal services. And while we can use that to assist us, there's always going to be in my opinion, there's always going to be that human component to the work in the public sector.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, from a futurist perspective, I think when we think about knowledge and what kinds of knowledge matters, where AI struggles is that relational knowledge, right? So all of the built up lived experiences between two people, AI can't replace that, right? You can't outsource trust to AI, right? And I think that's where, from what I can see at SGR, that's a really durable kind of difference and advantage. So, there's something that we said about Rebecca about making things faster and using AI to gather information more quickly. But yeah, that relational piece is going to be even more valuable going forward. And I suspect there will be a divergence between folks who are just using AI to replace people and using AI to enhance people. So,
Yeah,
let's go.
I think Lynn talk about, it's a good question about this person who asked it has been involved in interview processes, because we have taken a lot of looks at our interview process and are making changes. Lynn, would you share that, because you did such a good job, and I think it speaks directly to that question.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sure. Definitely a team effort of, tracking down ways of using AI that don't replace the connection that we have with candidates and clients. One is the two-way interview. And I agree. This is Dr. Padilla who said in the questions about the one-way interview. I see tremendous value in the two-way virtual because it supports what I mentioned earlier about it being an exploratory process for both candidate and client. So we are utilizing and planning to implement modules within our new applicant tracking system / CRM that will allow and facilitate that two-way process. And yeah, and I echo what Rebecca said. We really use it for synthesis and research. It allows me to connect with candidates through sourcing and it frees up my time so I can spend more time with candidates and clients.
And Allison, I'll add, we've had feedback directly from candidates that say they won't enter a process if it's just the one-way interview. So when you hear, comments of that we could actually lose candidates by not adjusting the way we do our interviews, we take notice of that. Certainly, we take our cues from the client, but we make sure that we share. This is some of the feedback SGR has gotten in regards to, options for interviews, and hope that they see the value of that input and can inform the decisions they make about how they want to receive interviews from candidates for their position.
Okay. We have a question from Merrill. Are there any best practices when managing client urgency or changing requirements that might risk quality of candidates? Kind of ties back to like good, great practices. Any response there?
Well,
yeah, I was trying to go ahead, please.
That's a big one because those are always a push and pull. Our clients want their city manager yesterday because their prior incumbent might have already left, or is planning to retire. I think any of us who've worked in local government know that often we don't have the luxury of having our predecessor there to help us with onboarding and getting up to speed. So there's always that sense of urgency from the client. I think where SGR goes above and beyond in making sure that we do present the highest quality candidate pool is in using the tools that we have at our disposal that we've invested in, and really constantly communicating with the client and being open, as Rebecca said earlier in our time together, about customizing our approach. So if we have a client that is eager to see the types of candidates that have expressed interest or that we've sourced for a particular position, then we're communicating with them what that candidate pool looks like 1 week in. So there are ways to make sure that we are addressing that sense of urgency with the client, while also continually sourcing quality candidates and just not letting the process drive the outcome, and being really intentional about what the needs of that particular client is, and catering to that, designing the process around that. And I think a lot of what contributes to our success is our network with our quality candidates and our investment in sourcing. So I don't see that we don't already cover that base as far as the timing and the quality of our candidate pools, but we are continually working on it.
It's a real tension. But if you're doing good work, you got to navigate. Okay, 2 more questions. You have time for that? 2 more brief questions? Awesome. Okay, so Janae, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, asks, as a candidate, are there any best practices to ensure my application package gets a solid look and a way to begin that relational stage with the recruiter, even if they're not the best candidate for that specific position? Anything you would say to that?
Well, yes, Janae, I would love to begin that relationship with you as early as you want to reach out and have me look at your resume, talk about where you want to go career-wise. So we are so open about that. All the recruiters are, whether the person is part of a current search effort or if they're just looking prospectively into what they want to do in the future. As far as standing out at that initial stage, it really is true what they say about marketing. You have 6 seconds typically to get someone's attention. We spend a lot more time on that. We do not use an AI reader to screen resumes. It's all of us spending the time to properly evaluate each candidate's qualifications, but you really need to be mindful on your resume, in my view, of articulating the level of responsibility, the span of control, and what the scope of responsibilities are that you've had in prior positions. Because at a glance, a recruiter can then see, okay, that's comparable, or this makes sense as a next step for this person. They're ready for that promotional position. But I can only do that as a recruiter if I can see really clearly for each employer what that level of responsibility is, span of control, and scope overall. So that would be my kind of quick tip, and I've got some specifics of how you can integrate that in your resume, but really be mindful of having that information front and center.
Helson, can I add to that?
Please, yeah.
Lynn did a great job. And as she said, any of us are willing to talk to candidates about, making sure that you're ready to take that next step. Just this week, I was talking with somebody who wants to be one of a candidate for SGR about, well, I had to abruptly leave my last role. Well, what I was saying to the person is be honest about that. You know what I mean? Because if you're not, that's the first thing that's going to be a strike against you as a candidate going up, let's say as a city manager candidate. So as we talked about to clients, be open and honest about who you are. And Lynn said it too when she talked about candidates, be open and honest in who you are, because just because you had to leave your last role abruptly does not mean that you're not a good fit to be a candidate for another community. They just want you to be, they want to know that you're going to be honest about why you had to leave abruptly from your last role, and that you don't see it as a deterrent in being a leader in another community. So again, we're constantly looking at a variety of scenarios, and we just want you, the advice quickly is to just be yourself in your materials. And do your homework too about, are you a good fit for the community, and then work with our recruitment team and all of us to help prepare you in the best way that you can be prepared for the roles.
Fantastic. Okay, one last, maybe even brief response. So Darren asks, if you are in transition, how do you go about getting resume advice that is not going to hurt financially? Any kind of, maybe it sounds like hiring someone, a resume coach is not a viable path for them. Where might they go? It sounds like y'all are very open to connecting.
Oh yes. I mean, you could connect with, any of us at SGR recruiters. But I would also, you could use some of the professional associations, whether it's SHRM or ICMA. A lot of times universities that have public administration programs will offer, free service to take a look at that. There's a lot of, kind of job hunting handbooks out there specifically for the public sector, that can also be really good resources. Your state, municipal leagues, associations, manager associations, all of those could be ways to get free support in I don't know, review or revamping, the materials that you would use to submit for jobs. So.
All right. My mute button wasn't working. So that'll be it. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us today and sharing the wealth of knowledge and experience with folks here today and folks watching the recording. Thank you for joining, folks in the audience as well. And thank you, Lisa, for making this all happen in the background. We couldn't be doing this without you. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Connect with Rebecca and Lynn for any more questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to chat.